All right, in this video, I want to talk real quick, hopefully real quick, about the 1,000-year reign of Christ. Now, the reason why I want to bring this up is because I was watching a video that I didn't realize was done by a Seventh-day Adventist. Now, they have an interesting belief that we as Christians go through the time of Jacob's trouble, known as the 7-year tribulation. And they believe that pretty much the same thing most Christians believe, is that there's this antichrist main figure, beast, right? Son of perdition, man of sin, and that he is going to give a mark. They believe some different things about that mark here, but they believe we go through that, then Jesus comes, he gets the Christians, takes them to heaven, and they rule with Jesus in heaven for 1,000 years. When it's kind of strange because only God rules in heaven. Right? There's nothing in the scriptures that mentions anybody other than God ruling in heaven. So it's strange to say that we would rule there, but I don't know, right? Not saying that we wouldn't have some kind of authority, being the bride of Christ, but it does seem a little weird. But the main reason why I want to bring this up is because while this person was mentioning this video that had to do with something with 2025, which I'll bring up, is he was saying, oh, people like me, we believe that Jesus is going to come and he's going to actually reign on the earth. Because that's actually what we see in prophecies of the Old Testament. Jesus returning, landing on the Mount of Olives, the Mount of Olives splitting in half, and then he enters into Jerusalem from the east and establishes his kingdom there for 1,000 years, fulfilling his promises to Israel. Because that's what Israel was looking for when Jesus first showed up. Like, hey, the Messiah is supposed to show up and make Israel the head of the nations and cast off this bondage that we have to Rome, to the Gentiles. Right? But he didn't do that. He's going to come and do that later. But you see, the point they were saying is that there's this Antichrist, beast, son of perdition, man of sin fellow who's going to show up, and that people like me, if we end up going through this 7-year tribulation, we're going to, for some reason, think that this is Jesus, because Jesus is supposed to come and reign on the earth. So when he comes reigning on the earth, we're going to believe him. This shows a complete ignorance of our actual belief. And that is that before this period happens, there is a thing called a rapture. But let's say I'm wrong about this. Let's say there is no pre-trib rapture. I'm not, but let's just pretend that I am for a moment here. And we're not raptured, and then this does not happen, and we have to go through this. I know about this Antichrist beast, son of perdition, who's supposed to come before Jesus shows up, who's going to have his mark. Why would I believe that is Jesus? I believe the same thing. I know of the same prophecies. Why would I believe that this is Jesus? Just because he's claiming that he is and he's trying to establish a kingdom on earth? I mean, get out of town. That this is just a cheap argument to try to dismiss what other people believe outside of the SDA church. I used to be Seventh-day Adventist. I know the mindset. Now, what I like to wrap up with is this here. You know, I was looking at stuff that had to do with the year 2025, and this is some interesting stuff. I'll give you 3 things pointing to the year 2025. One thing mainly picked up by Heather R. That's her YouTube channel name. I've been hearing it from other people, but I first heard it from her and started to understand it from her, is the 70 Jubilees from when Israel entered into the Promised Land, and this seems to be in the year 1406. Other dates were 1407 and 1408, but those dates have passed, as 70 jubilees from 1408 would bring us to 2023, and from 2027 would bring us to 2024, and those years have passed. So it looks like 1406 would be that year, and that is obviously the year 2025. That is 70 jubilees from that time. Very cool stuff. Also, Daniel 12 tells us about a 1290 year prophecy and a 1335 year prophecy. Now, the 1290 is from when the sacrifices are stopped, and this is done by Babylon, and 1290 years later actually brings us to about 692 AD, when guess what happened? It tells us what is supposed to happen in Daniel 12. It's the abomination of desolation. This is when the dome of the rock was actually built. That whole Muslim thing established here. And guess what? 1335 years from then, I think you can do the math here. Now, this actually might be a bit off because 692 is not necessarily that exact day, but let's try to do the math real quick. We get a 7, 2, 20, 27 actually from here. But most of the dates I see actually says 691. I just put 692 because it was the first number that came out of my head when I was thinking about it. But there's also dates where this happened at 688, but we know that's wrong because that would bring us to, 3 years before that would be 2023-ish. So yeah, that's already passed. So we know it's roughly in that time frame there. And that seems to line up with this quite well. And then a while ago, for about a year or two, I've been talking about, well, obviously longer than a year or two. I've been saying this since 2022, 2023. I was starting to get tired of all the people saying the rapture is going to happen at this feast day, and every time it passes, it's this next feast day, it's this next one. And it was like, hey, how about we slow down and we try to figure out the year? And when I was going through Matthew 24 and looking at the fig tree generation, I was putting things together, and it looked like the earliest the rapture could happen was in the fall of 2024, and the latest would be in the spring of 2026. And what's in the middle? Right here, 2025. Right? Lines up there. Then we have God a minute talking about how Jacob, or his name Israel, apparently married Leah when he was 77. And then 7 years later, when he's 84, he marries Rachel. Well, Israel as a nation is going to be 77 years old, you guessed it, in 2025. Right? So all these points pointing to 2025. But in this video that was done by a Seventh-day Adventist, it was actually kind of interesting. It was talking about Elena Blavatsky and Alice A. Bailey and these New Agers and these Luciferians, these Satanists, who have these prophecies that they've done since the 1900s, saying that in 2025, their masters will reveal themselves, the true rulers of this world, and they come as aliens, but these are really fallen angels. And as part of this, there was this group, I can't remember the name of it, but apparently since 1425, they've been having this meeting, 100 members of the hierarchy of the world. I don't know how true this is. This is just what they were claiming. Or not 100 of them, but every 100 years, the hierarchy would meet to decide what they're going to do with the world since 1425. And then, of course, 1525, 1625, 1725, 1825, 1925, and then, of course, 2025. And what I thought was interesting there is that that's the seventh one. It's kind of like a completion, right? 7. And they were saying that they're going to have their meeting for 2025 to decide what they're going to do for the next 100 years. And it's interesting that all these weird things with the scriptures are also coinciding with things from the occult. Thought you might like that. So I thought it was a cool way to wrap up this video. Thank you for watching all the way through. That's a great way to support me and this channel. And if you see that I'm feeding the sheep and I'm fighting that spiritual fight to win over hearts, souls, and of men and women, that is a spiritual fight done with words, using reasoning, logic, and the Word of God. And it's not done by fisticuffs and fighting with one another, then just please pray for me right now that God keeps me going and keeps this ministry growing at least long enough until he comes and gets us, right? Or until I unfortunately die early, which I would not complain about if that's God's will. And if you want to support some other ways, like, subscribe, share the video, interact in the comments section. This draws attention to the video and draws attention to the channel. I would appreciate the help. And if you can and you want to, you can support us financially with 4 different ways in the info box. But only if you're able to, and of course, you want to. Because I need your help to keep this ministry going. And I know things aren't going well for everybody. So it's only if you're able to. I know God will provide one way or another. And he'll have me do something else if this ministry ends up shutting down. So, with all that being said, thanks for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one. If we're not raptured by then.